Module 2. The Four Clairs. We human souls make sense of the world through our physical senses, which we also use when receiving energetic communication. There are four main ways, known as the clairs, in which we intuitively receive insight and information. Part of the process of intuitive development is learning to identify which of these are more natural to us, and usually there will be more than one. So, what are the four clairs? The first one is clairsentience. Clairsentience is the ability to read people or objects through feeling. This includes physical sensation and emotions. So physical examples are hot, cold, tired or energized, as well as bodily discomfort or pain. Emotional examples of clairsentience are feeling happy, cheerful, excited or optimistic. Also, sad, bored, lonely, fearful, frustrated, resentful or angry. The second is claircognizance. Claircognizance is to simply know something intuitively. Not as in having an opinion, but rather feeling sure about a situation or person. This is a tricky one to explain, as it is closely related to clairsentience, because in order to know something in this way, as opposed to a fact we have learned, we also have to be feeling it. For example, I was recently tuning into a female customer and I knew for sure that she had a dark side. However, I could not only feel it, I could see it too, which demonstrates how any combination of the four clairs can work together. I was immediately aware of her capacity to bear grudges, to intentionally get even with others, and to generally view life through a negative lens, which was backed up by some of the images and scenes my mind produced. Of course, there will be reasons behind this attitude connected to her past and the way in which she has processed her experiences. And obviously, I didn't just come out and say all of this to her. That would not have been the acceptable thing to do. However, with some of the predictions I offered, I made sure to include what I felt was relevant insight and guidance, subtle warnings about certain forthcoming events and the best ways in which to respond to them. The third is clairvoyance. Now, clairvoyance is the ability to see things that are not physically there. I talk about the screen of my mind, which I say is located in that space beyond our closed eyelids and upon which images and scenes appear. However, when consciously tuning in, it is also possible to perceive images whilst the eyes are open, as if we are picturing them in the air. When I do this, I shift my focus slightly to one side and gaze through that which is physically there. It might be a still frame or a moving clip, but neither stay too long. I have occasionally, and always just prior to falling asleep, experienced what only can be described as a short movie, except with a more enhanced quality than my usual visions, for want of a better word. When this happens, I try hard to keep it going for as long as I can, but it always fades out eventually. There was one in particular that I will never forget. I was looking down upon a scene that was taking place in what looked like a hot and dry eastern country. There was a group of men milling around, all dressed in uniform and bearing guns. Suddenly, a man was led into their midst, hands tied behind his back, shoulders slumped, head down. and I was gripped by a sudden sense of gut-wrenching fear, which would be clairsentience. He was ordered to kneel on the ground, and then the scene ended. It left me completely shaken and sad, especially as it felt as real as if I'd been watching from the top of a neighbouring building. I hadn't been thinking about anything that might have triggered the experience, and I wasn't properly asleep. For some reason, I had inadvertently tuned into something that either had happened, was currently happening, or was going to happen. Whichever one it was, there was not a darned thing I could do about it. And this is one of the downsides to intuition. The fact that there will be many occasions upon which we can do nothing at all with information we receive. Following one particularly distressing experience of intuitively working on the case of 2 missing children and reporting my insights to the police, who were polite but dismissive, I realised that it had all been a waste of time and energy. Even though it eventually emerged that I was actually correct in much of what I described, I had merely been following behind the process rather than ahead of it. Or at least because some of the scenes and images that my mind produced were like very short clips of a much longer movie, there were missing pieces. The whole thing demanded so much emotional energy from me over a period of weeks that it left me feeling very ill indeed after the children's bodies were found, in a place of which I had drawn and dated a picture, but without any understanding of its relevance. It was only when that location was shown on the TV news that it made sense. However, by that time, it was too late. Obviously, it would have all been worth it if it had led to a different, happier result, but it didn't. And that was the last time I involved myself in such a situation, at least to such a degree. The whole experience starkly brought home to me the realization that intuition can sometimes be a cruel mistress, providing enough to keep you hooked, but not enough to be useful. Watching the TV series Psychic Detectives, the only psychic show I would watch, I was a little reassured to discover that this is how it works for others too, not just for me. I was also fascinated to see that the featured detectives worked pretty much in the same way that I myself do. Seeing the faces of people we don't know and have never met is another aspect of clairvoyance. When this happens to me, it is usually always late at night, again, when in that place between wake and sleep. I'm pretty sure that other people have also experienced this, but maybe keep it to themselves for fear of being seen as weird. Sometimes the images are still like old photographs. Sometimes they are animated, but always brief. My conclusion is that when this happens, we are inadvertently picking up random transmissions from the ether, rather than us being mithered by deceased people. The fourth is clairaudience. Clairaudience is the hearing of something that is spoken, but not usually in a sinister sense. The voice might sound like your own or someone else's. And this is something that can happen at any time and in any place. Also, what is said might be relevant to you or nothing whatsoever to do with you. It isn't uncommon to hear a snippet of a conversation that has already occurred and is drifting on the ether. Whilst working with a customer, my mind will often emit a word, a name, or a phrase that comes with no further explanation. I call them shooting stars. The voice is nondescript. I can't describe it. However, I have heard things that are delivered in a definite voice and clearly nothing to do with me. I once heard out of the blue a man with an American accent saying, "You aren't listening to me, buddy." It took me by complete surprise, especially as I was out and about simply enjoying the countryside. And I have, at night, heard snippets of conversations as if I'm flicking through radio stations. I once even heard a sudden burst of loud, rather raucous laughter close to my ear, which was particularly irritating. On a more serious note, there was another occasion several years ago when a voice in my head said, "Kim will die," as I walked past our dog as she lay sleeping under the dining room table. As she appeared to be in good health, I shook it off, believing that it was just my own negative mind talking. A few days later, she went to sleep in front of the fire and didn't wake up again. She passed in her sleep. To this day, I still don't know why. Thinking about it afterward, the voice had been the neutral one that I'd heard many times before. My higher self or an outside communicator? I really can't say for sure. There is something else I feel is worthy of mention here. Touch. The sensation of being physically touched when no one is within our vicinity. Being a believer in looking for a rational explanation first and foremost, I feel that it is important to first consider if what we are feeling has a physical explanation. After all, the body can do all kinds of random things, such as pulsing, twitching, and itching. It is possible that what we just experienced has nothing to do with otherworldly beings. However, there are times when we know for sure that we've been touched by a non-physical being. I clearly remember the kiss I received on my cheek while sobbing about the passing of one of my nieces. I also remember a gentle kiss to my lips delivered by a little girl I was communicating with who was not of this world. My hair has been stroked, my hands and arms have been touched, and I've also felt a sudden physical pressure of weight on the bed, as if an animal has jumped up and settled down alongside me, only to discover, when sitting up to see which pet it is, that no animal is present. Many people have had similar stories to tell. And some of these have been unnerving rather than comforting or merely interesting. It is a form of receiving, though one that is personal to ourselves rather than to others. So let's have a quick recap up to this point. Intuition is personal to ourselves and that which is directly related to us. It tends to be spontaneous in nature. Psychic is a honed version of intuition and is more related to other people and to situations not directly associated with ourselves. It can be spontaneous or it can be consciously switched on to one degree or another. This course is about the recognition and enhancement of our intuitive capacity with the main focus on the development of feeling, which is the absolute foundation of intuition. We will need to play around and to practice in order to establish which of the clairs we ourselves most naturally use. Do we tend to receive intuitive information primarily through images, or through hearing, or through physical and emotional sensations and feelings? Or is it a combination, but with one being more dominant? The next module is learning to tune in, which includes practical exercises.